The very public narrative of the disappearance of Emmanuel Harrow began as any parent's absolute worst nightmare. It was a story of a random, senseless violence, right? That would very soon unravel to reveal a much more intimate and calculated horror. The foundation of this entire deception was laid on the evening of August 14th, 2025, when Rebecca Harrow, 41 years old, placed a very frantic call to authorities, setting in motion a very large-scale investigation that would very quickly captivate and ultimately horrify us as a nation. The initial report, like I said, was a mother's worst nightmare. At approximately 7:47 p.m., Rebecca Harrow reported that her 7-month-old beautiful baby boy, Emmanuel Harrow, had been abducted from the parking lot of a Big Five sporting goods store in the San Bernardino County community of Yucaipa. Her account was detailed by the specific descriptions, she thought. While changing Emmanuel's diaper, outside of her vehicle, she was physically assaulted by an unknown assailant. She claimed to have heard someone say, "Hola," just before she was rendered unconscious. Said she was hit from behind, but ended up with a black eye, which was weird, and we talk about that. When she awoke, she said she was on the pavement and her infant son, Emmanuel, was gone. Listen, there's been some updates. I've been waiting. I get updates every day, and I know when I first started talking about Emmanuel in the episode previous to this, I said that I would update every time. I lied. Not because I didn't want to, but just because lifes. Okay. Lifes. But I've been keeping up with it. I've been following it very closely. And there was a press conference today. And so now I know everybody is talking about this. Every true crime YouTuber on this space is talking about this. And so if you're here with me to hear me talk about it, I love you for that, because I know you don't have to be. There's a million other places you could be. So thank you. With that being said, let's unravel. I look like crap, and I'm sorry. Forgive me for that, but I just got off work. My desk and my house is a mess. Everything behind me is a mess. We're going forward because this is so important. I was not planning on uploading tonight, but it has to be talked about. I've been so worried about this baby. I want to talk about it with you guys. So, picking up where we left off, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department responded immediately. Again, we did touch on this very briefly. This is a little deeper than the previous episode because more information has come out. So this first part will be a little repetitive. Skip forward if you don't, want to go through it with me. But if you do, hey, the sheriff's department responded very swiftly to Mrs. Harrow's call. They launched a search of the area immediately. They found no trace of the child, even with like canine, like scent dogs. There was no trace of baby Emmanuel in this area. He was last reported being seen wearing a black onesie, a Nike onesie, I think they said. Rebecca Harrow and Jake Harrow's initial narrative, right? It was these very chilling, casual details. And it created this very public wave of sympathy and of fear, right? Of grief in the days that followed since my last update. Jake Harrow and Rebecca Harrow did they didn't really retreat into private grief. Instead, they very actively engaged with the media. We've reviewed one of the videos, one of the interviews in my last video. They made very emotional public pleas for their son's safe return. And I only say it that way because, to me, I smelled bullshit from the very beginning, which was what my first video was about. Although I was very cautious, but I was very skeptical, and apparently rightfully so, allegedly. They presented this very united front of very desperate, heartbroken parents. They were urging the public to help them find their son, their missing child, and they were leveraging news outlets to help amplify that story. And this, I would say, proactive media engagement was not like this, what they were portraying, right? It was not just like this cry for help, right? It was a very sustained multi-day, what I would call performance, designed to manipulate the public perception and misdirect a very sprawling law enforcement effort, right? There was so many people out here looking for Emmanuel. Law enforcement, the public, family, friends, loved ones, the community, the commitment to this now, what I wholeheartedly, I wholeheartedly believed it then. I just didn't want to speak until I had a little bit more. But now this, what I would call a very fabricated reality, was so profound that Rebecca Harrow maintained the kidnapping story even after her arrest. Apparently, in an interview from jail, she said, "I want to be out looking for my baby," quote unquote, and very staunchly defended her husband, Jake Harrow, stating that he would never hurt an infant. This very unwavering adherence to the lie, even as the official investigation has clearly identified her and her husband as the primary suspects in Emmanuel's disappearance, demonstrates to me a very calculated attempt to weaponize public emotion and media attention as like a shield for this unthinkable crime that they are accused of committing at this point. The performance of victimhood here, to me, was it like this very deliberate attempt. It was like a campaign of public deception. And it suggests to me a psychological manipulation and forethought that was kind of to make a play on that very image of a very panicked, grieving parent, right? This is not the first time we've seen this. And I think this is why it gets a little easier to identify these things in media interviews. I smell the bullshit from the onset. But while the Harrows constructed this narrative, investigators they were already on it, right? We knew this. They were very methodically deconstructing this right away. Right away. I think they knew that something was a little stinky from the get-go. Nothing made sense. Nothing seemed cohesive. Nothing seemed genuine, in my opinion. There was not a single, if anybody can show me, and maybe I'm wrong because I've only seen like clips here and there, clips. But if anybody could show me like a raw, uncut footage of a single fucking tear throughout any of their media interviews, I want to see that. I didn't see that. Not a single tear. Instead of really campaigning for the return of their son and instead of demonstrating this real, genuine grief and fear when faced with the possible loss of their son, it really was more about painting a narrative, like what the story was, where I was, what happened, what took place. Like, I really just feel like I wouldn't give a shit about the story so much if one of my children went missing. I would literally just be unable to function as a human being, and my media interviews would be useless. I can't imagine even forming a cohesive sentence, much less just regurgitating a narrative. But that's just me, and again, I don't know. Everyone reacts differently to trauma. Everyone's different. And so this is all, again, my opinion. I'm no expert in absolutely anything. I'm no expert in anything. I can give shots and I can draw blood really good. Like, I can see a vein from across the room. So maybe I'm an expert in venipuncture. But other than that, body language, psychology, I'm no expert. These are just my opinions. Anyway, moving on. So while the Harrows, Rebecca and Jake, constructing the public narrative of tragedy, investigators behind those scenes were very methodically deconstructing it, right? The investigation very quickly, quite quickly, in my opinion, pivoted from a search for an unknown kidnapper to a homicide inquiry focused very squarely on Emmanuel's parents, Jake and Rebecca, and forensic and behavioral indicators, I think, definitely began to conflict and contradict their stories. So this entire facade began to crumble literally within days. By Monday, this is stinky. And by Monday, which was August the 18th, which was just 4 days after the initial report, the San Bernardino, listen, if I try to say that fast, it sounds crazy. San Bernardino County Sheriff's, oh, I did it. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. Why do I have a chair if I use it completely sideways? Chairs work better when the back is against your back. I'm learning. Where was the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department announced on that Monday a very critical development in this story. They had identified, as we talked about, inconsistencies in Rebecca's statements. So, like I was saying, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office announced a very critical development. They had stated that they had identified all of these inconsistencies in Rebecca Harrow's statements, and that when detectives confronted her with these discrepancies, her whole posture just kind of shifted very dramatically. She immediately stopped cooperating with investigators, and she declined to continue any interviews. And I think this move, in any case, and don't get me wrong, I am 100% advocate for making sure that if you're ever in any legal trouble, like, make sure you have an attorney present, make sure that you invoke that right to have an attorney present. And so it could have been just that. I could see how, a lay citizen would say, listen, I don't know what I'm getting. I don't know what I've got myself into, but I want my attorney present. I'm with that 100%. But I think that in this situation, based on her statements, her story, and maybe even some other things that they had acquired at this point, this was a move to them that signaled that she had something to hide. And I believe they were correct. There was this attempt to control this very rapidly changing narrative by Jake Harrow's attorney. His name is Vincent Hughes. He insisted that the family was still cooperating, even though they were not. They weren't. They weren't cooperating. They weren't talking. They were not cooperating. They weren't. He claimed that Rebecca had refused a polygraph test, and because she was just so overcome with emotion, right? Quote unquote, overcome with emotion, due to her son's disappearance, which I guess I could get. I could get that. I can see myself being overcome with emotion, but I'm not sure that I wouldn't want to just completely eliminate myself as a suspect so that the investigation could move forward. I feel like if I was the parent of a missing child, first of all, I don't know how or if I would be able, again, I am a mother. And the thought of one of my children going missing is absolutely sickening and terrifying to me. I worry about it every day, just because of the world that we live in. However, I feel like if there was an investigation into their disappearance and I knew that I had nothing to do with it, and you wanted me to sit down for 20 minutes and take a polygraph test so that you could eliminate me as a suspect and move forward in your investigation, I would be 100% down to do that. Regardless of my fear of how my emotion might interfere with test results or what, I don't give a shit. Do what you have to do so that you understand that I am not the perpetrator here, and that you need to start moving forward with your investigation because I need my child home. period. Do what you have to do. I don't care. I know how this goes. Let's get it done. And so to me, just completely refusing to do those things and to take those steps, I can see how as an investigator, because even just me as a speculator in the public, it's fishy. Why not, Rebecca? Like, why not? So this kind of marked the whole beginning of all of the like legal maneuvering to kind of counter the growing suspicion from law enforcement. What is up with my hands? I have had way too much coffee today. Anyway, with Rebecca Harrow's cooperation withdrawn, right? At this point, we know she's not cooperating. She's not talking. She's done. So at that point, the investigation kind of shifts, right? The focus of the investigation shifts from the supposed crime scene in Ukaipa to the family's actual home in, okay, Cabazon. Anyway, this is an unincorporated sort of community in Riverside County. Okay, Riverside County is way easier to say. Authorities did execute search warrants at the home, right? They deployed units that are trained to detect human remains. A car belonging to Jake Harrow, Emmanuel's dad, was also seized for forensic analysis. The geographic expansion of the search across both San Bernardino and Riverside County made it clear, in my opinion, that investigators no longer believed that the crime itself was confined to the Big Five parking lot. The evidentiary trail, I guess, led to a grim conclusion. So, on Friday, August 22nd, last Friday, what's today? Wednesday. So Friday, just over a week after Emmanuel was reported missing, Jake and Rebecca Harrow were arrested at their home and booked under suspicion of murder. This officially transformed this very public case from a search for a missing child to a homicide investigation. And we still don't have Emmanuel. Guys, we still don't have this baby home. So following their arrests, the investigation kind of enters this new somber phase, right? We're no longer looking for Emmanuel. I think we've all come to that conclusion. We're no longer looking for Emmanuel. We're looking for Emmanuel's body. Over this past weekend, sheriff's deputies conducted a very meticulous search of a field along the westbound shoulder of the 60 freeway near Gilman Springs Road in Moreno Valley. In a very telling development, Jake Harrow, we see now, clad in a jail jumpsuit, was present at the search site. While the sheriff's department pointedly refused to characterize his presence as, quote, providing assistance, unquote, Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin later confirmed that Jake Harrow had, quote, provided some cooperation, unquote. This very starkly contrasted with his wife's continued silence and denial, suggesting a potential fracture in their united front and an attempt by Jake Harrow to cooperate with authorities or even negotiate with authorities. The search, however, as far as we know, did not immediately lead to the recovery of Emmanuel's remains. So today, August 27th, 2025, officials from Riverside and San Bernardino counties held a joint press conference that stripped away the last vestiges of the kidnapping myth and laid very bare the prosecution's deeply disturbing theory of the crime. So this press conference event was more than like a simple informational update. It was a prosecutorial strategy in my opinion, designed to frame the public narrative, preempt defense arguments, and issue a very blistering indictment of what law enforcement officials described as a catastrophic failure of the justice system. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin announced the state's core belief, which was this: Emmanuel Harrow was not the victim of some random abduction. Emmanuel Harrow was the victim of sustained and severe child abuse at the hands of his own parents, Rebecca and Jake Harrow. Hestrin's words were very direct here and very unequivocal, intending to leave no room for doubt. Quote, "The filing in this case reflects our belief that baby Emmanuel was abused, a victim of child abuse over time, and that eventually, because of that abuse, he succumbed to those injuries." So prosecutors stated today that they believe that the murder of Emmanuel, I hate this. The murder of Emmanuel occurred between August 5th, which was the last day that Emmanuel was confirmed to be alive, and August 14th, which was the day of the false report. This timeline kind of implies that Emmanuel was likely dead for as long as 9 days, while his parents were in the background, right? Kind of preparing to launch this elaborate public deception. By presenting this theory of long-term abuse and immediately connecting it to Jake Harrow's past, Hestrin is not just informing the media, he's building a very powerful and emotional narrative of a preventable tragedy and effectively shaping the case in the court of public opinion. I mean, as far as that goes, before it ever even reaches a jury. DA Hestrom provided a very crucial update on the search for the child's body, revealing that investigators have a, quote, strong indication of where Emmanuel's remains might be located. Though, as of today, they have not yet been recovered. This statement suggests that the information gleaned from Jake Harrow's limited cooperation was at least significant, though not yet conclusive. Jake and Rebecca were formally charged with felony murder with malice, along with a misdemeanor count of filing a false police report. They are each being held on $1 million bail, and their arraignment, which was originally scheduled for yesterday, was postponed until September the 4th after the holiday. Hestring confirmed that the case is being prosecuted in Riverside County because although the false report was made in Yucaipa, investigators believe that the abuse and the murder occurred at or near the family's home in Riverside County. So the unified front presented by the district attorney and the sheriffs of 2 different counties projected this image of overwhelming institutional certainty, which again is a very strategic move to control the narrative before the defense could come up with a response. The most explosive sort of element of the press conference tonight was the detailed disclosure of Jake Harrow's prior conviction for child abuse. Now, we had already been hearing about all of these prior allegations and I believe convictions, but the press conference today, they put it out there. It's there now. We know. And the case, the outcome of that case, according to this district attorney who was I mean, he seemed genuinely perturbed at the fact that Jake Harrow's prior conviction for child abuse and the sentencing thereafter very directly enabled the tragedy that befell Emmanuel. The history that they provided, it really gives sort of this chilling context for the current charges and formed the basis of Hestron's very public condemnation of the current state of our judicial system. Here's a little background. In 2018, Haro was prosecuted for an act of willful child cruelty against his then 10-week-old daughter from a prior relationship before Rebecca. The injuries inflicted upon this baby girl were terrible, catastrophic. D.A. Hestron enumerated the damage in very grim detail. This child sustained multiple rib fractures, a partial skull fracture, a brain hemorrhage, a broken leg, retinal hemorrhages, and at least 2 seizures. The abuse was so severe that it left this child with permanent damage, and this child is now bedridden as a result of that abuse. The doctor who examined the baby concluded that her condition could have been fatal were there not medical intervention at the time that it was sought. At that time, when this was taking place, Jake Harrow offered his explanation for the injuries. He claimed that he had accidentally dropped the baby girl while giving her a bath in the kitchen sink. However, medical experts had determined that this was entirely inconsistent with the nature and the severity of the trauma that 10-week-old baby girl had suffered. Listen, this pattern of Jake Harrow's fabricating this external sort of exculpatory cause of his own violent actions against his own children is a very critical component for his criminal profile here. It speaks volumes. The quote accidental drop unquote that occurred in 2018 was a direct precursor to the kidnapping of 2025. Both were completely false narratives designed to cover up horrific child abuse. And so what happened? Despite that insanely horrific crime that Jake Harrow committed in 2018, right? There was no prison sentence. No. After Jake Harrow pleaded guilty to that crime, prosecution had argued very strongly for prison time as a part of his sentencing. However, there was a visiting judge from San Bernardino County, and he handed down a suspended sentence. So instead of being incarcerated, Jake Harrow was sentenced to, I think it was 180 days of a work release program, and he was placed on probation at that time. Listen, D.A. Hestron at today's press conference, he revealed that the prosecutor at that time had forcibly objected to this extremely lenient sentence at that time, right? He said that these crimes demanded a prison term. The judge at that time, however, decided that Harrow, quote, deserved an extra break, unquote. Less than a year later, while on probation for that very crime, Jake Harrow was allegedly caught with a firearm that led to a probation violation charge. Listen, today's press conference was not just about Jake Harrow, right? But it did kind of put the criminal justice system itself on trial. The extraordinary blunt criticism leveled by D.A. Hestron and the sheriff against the judiciary is a rare event, right? It signaled a very deep fracture in the institutional relationships that underpin our entire legal process. His language was devoid of what we would consider the typical legalistic restraint. He repeatedly described the judge's 2023 sentencing of Jake Harrow as an quote, outrageous error in judgment, unquote, and as, quote, absolutely outrageous, unquote. He then drew a very direct, unsparing line from that decision to today's tragedy. Quote, Mr. Harrow should have been in prison at the time that this crime happened. And if that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would still be alive today. He concluded with a very stark assessment, quote, when our criminal justice system breaks down, I'm going to call it like it is and say it broke down, unquote. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco reinforced this message, and he stated, quote, we have an absolute breakdown of the justice system, and we are not preventing other children from being harmed when someone like Jake is allowed to be out on the streets. Together, Hestron and Bianco painted a picture of a system that has failed in its most fundamental duty to protect the innocent from known predators. Listen, because I want to address everything that might come up, I want to talk about this. While Hestron's outrage in this case, in Emmanuel Harrow's case, is palpable, it exists within this very complex and contradictory political context. His office specifically has been a frequent target of criticism from civil rights organizations and criminal justice reform advocates who argue that his policies contribute to systemic dysfunction themselves. So there's this report by the ACLU analyzing data from 2017 to 2020, and it found that this particular prosecutor, Hestron's office, often prosecutes youth at a rate 2.5 times the state average and exhibits significant racial disparities in charging. Very crucially, the ACLU report also found that approximately 57% of the charges filed by the Riverside County DA's office during that period were for low-level offenses that should have been either declined or diverted to community-based programs. Critics argue that this, quote, tough on crime approach, which focuses on maximizing the volume of prosecutions, right? Ultimately, that's what this does. Contributes significantly to court backlogs and places immense strain on judicial resources. So this then creates an environment where judges are under pressure to clear dockets, which can lead to a lot of plea deals and a lot of sentencing outcomes that may not fully reflect the severity of the given crime. In the Haro case, District Attorney Hestron is publicly condemning a single instance of judicial leniency as a systemic failure, yet his own office's alleged policy of aggressively prosecuting a high volume of low-level cases helps create the very systemic pressures, right? Overburdened courts and strained resources that can incentivize such compromised outcomes. So he is, in effect, decrying a symptom of a problem that his own prosecutorial philosophy is accused of exacerbating. I'm only bringing this up because I've seen it mentioned. And so the tragedy of Emmanuel thus becomes a powerful political instrument in a larger battle over the future of the criminal justice system in California. Listen, the emotional trajectory of the community and the media in the Emmanuel Harrow case really mirrors the investigation itself. This is a journey from hopeful sympathy to horrified revulsion. The parents' initial deception was highly effective. It drew in this compassionate response, myself included, from a public that is conditioned to believe in the sanctity of parental love. In the first week after the kidnapping report, the community in the Inland Empire rallied around the Haro family, a local pastor from Yucaipa. His name is David Hernandez. He led multiple prayer vigils, makeshift memorials of flowers and stuffed animals, and these things all appeared outside of the family's home. And this outpouring of support, it really demonstrates the success of the parents' initial narrative. The news on August 22nd that Jake and Rebecca had been arrested for their son's murder kind of sent this shockwave through the local community. Now, myself, I was not shocked. I was not surprised. I was not taken aback. Let me know down below how you felt when you heard that news. Residents, however, right, these people who had been very anxiously following the case, they expressed a sense of like betrayal and a sense of horror. One woman who had been literally losing sleep over this case told reporters that she was shaking with goosebumps upon hearing of the arrests of Jake and Rebecca Harrow, confirming this like unspoken suspicion that she had harbored. And the case, again, everyone's talking about this case. And if you're sitting here listening to me go on and on about this stuff that I've researched since I started hearing about it, if you're here with me, I love you for that, because everyone is talking about it. It's gotten intense national media scrutiny. It has become a fixture on true crime YouTube platforms, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere that I look, here it is. And news shows, court TV, I mean, every detail of the parents' behavior and the investigation's findings are being dissected for a national audience. The revelations from today's press conference, right, particularly the spoken out loud details of Jake Harrow's prior abuse conviction and the very lenient sentence that he received, it really solidified this very powerful narrative in the court of public opinion. The outrage is directed not only at Emmanuel's parents, Jake and Rebecca Harrow, but also at the judge and at the system that allowed Jake Harrow to be free. Legal commentators that I have seen on many platforms have retrospectively described the parents' initial media interviews and all the pleas for help as disgusting. I don't know. This case has really just become kind of a very tragic touchstone for much broader public discussions about the failures of child protective services and the criminal justice system's ability to protect vulnerable children from known abusers. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so as the legal process begins, right, two critical elements of the Emmanuel Harrow case remain unsolved. One, where is he? We've seen Jake out there in his orange jumpsuit with the sheriff's department. Where, bro, you know where he is. Where is Emmanuel? Bring him home. the location of his body right now, right? We need that for that final measure of accountability for his death. And the path to justice is now a formal one. It is set to unfold in Riverside County courtrooms, but the search for Emmanuel himself continues to cast this very somber shadow all over all of these proceedings. Despite the confidence that has been expressed by the district attorney, the physical remains of Emmanuel Harrow have not yet been recovered. The ongoing search is critical, and it's a very emotionally fraught component of this entire case. For prosecutors, the recovery of the body is paramount. It's going to allow forensic pathologists to determine a definitive cause of death, although what's been speculated is that the cause of death was, long-term abuse that Emmanuel eventually succumbed to. But this will potentially provide physical evidence as well to kind of corroborate the theory of that long-term abuse, and also to undermine any alternative theories that the defense might try to present. For the community itself, finding Emmanuel is a matter of providing this very final measure of dignity to a child who was denied that dignity throughout his very short life. Jake and Rebecca Harrow are scheduled for their arraignment on September 4th. They will at that time they will formally enter pleas to the charges of murder and filing false police reports. The prosecution will then build its case on a foundation of evidence gathered from the family's home, the family's vehicles, the documented inconsistencies in the parents' very public statements, Jake Harrow's history of child abuse, and any information he provided during his limited cooperation. The defense is very likely just going to challenge the state's case by emphasizing the lack of a body and questioning the timeline and the evidence that supports the theory of abuse. The death of this poor baby boy is a story of multiple cascading failures. He was, as DA Hestron stated, unequivocally failed by his parents. Their alleged actions represent the ultimate betrayal of trust, and yet the case has forced a very painful public examination of whether Emmanuel was also failed by a justice system that had prior clear opportunity to intervene. The 2023 decision to grant probation to a man who had inflicted permanent, life-altering injuries on his infant daughter at that time that entire system is now under extremely intense scrutiny in this case, and I think that's our call to action. The reasons for that decision, whether it was just an error in judgment, whether it was a product of systemic pressures, maybe some combination thereof, these are at the heart of this debate that is going on right now, and will continue to be at the heart of this debate long after the verdict in this case is rendered. The search for baby Emmanuel's body continues. It continues. And as does the search for accountability in a tragedy that authorities have declared with haunting certainty was entirely fucking preventable. This case sucks. I just want this baby boy found. I want him found. I want him brought home. I'm here for you, baby Emmanuel. This is heartbreaking. And it really is it's a painful look at what these failures can result in. Like in so many aspects of this case, it was just failure, failure, failure. So again, I am watching, constantly. I'm just waiting for that update to say that he's been found. And when he is, I'll be here to share it with you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Again, I know you guys could be a million other places right now. So thank you for making it here to the end with me just rambling. I will see you guys really soon. There is a case that I am working on right now. Hope to have it up within a couple days. And until I see you then, please stay safe. Keep asking all of those questions and keep unraveling. Love you.